Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. Are you struggling with board engagement? Do you wish your board members offered you more support and saw themselves as partners in the mission, in growing the mission of your organization? Well, if you answered yes to any of these, then this is your show. Stay tuned for Coffee Time with Masterminds.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds. My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Hi, everyone. That was a slow beginning. I felt all quiet, like I was whispering, but welcome to this amazing Friday morning. I am Cynthia Rojas with Coffee Time with Masterminds, a 30-minute conversation with and for mission-based leaders or leaders of mission-based organizations. And we want to welcome our viewers in the USA and our listeners in Australia. And if you are joining us this morning, please give us your name and where you're from in the comments. We always love to hear who is joining us. Today, we have a treat. I am joined by Hardy Smith, author of the book, Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game: How to Break the Cycle of Frustrating Relationships and Benefit from Fully Engaged Boards. I have to tell you, this is a hot topic, but Hardy has been dedicating his work to solving the problem many mission-based leaders have, and that is board engagement. So let's bring Hardy on.
Hello, Cynthia, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to visit with yourself, and I know Peta's in the background there. Hey, Peta, and I look forward to sharing a great conversation and maybe some entertainment value for your Coffee Time with Mastermind viewers and listeners. Thank you.
We love entertainment, that's for sure. Oh my God, Hardy, I've been consulting for 3 years, and before that, I was in a nonprofit sector for almost 20 years. And I have to tell you, everyone complains about board members. And I have a theory, but before we get into my theories, I want to hear from you. How did you get into this work, and what inspired the book?
Well, Cynthia, thank you for that great question. I get, as you might expect, I get asked that question quite frequently. Well, first, let me explain. My professional background includes 30 years in the high performance world of NASCAR racing. Now, I was not a driver.
Oh, okay.
So I was involved in the business of the business.
Oh.
And really, my one or two sentence job description, my mandate was to identify potential problems or opportunities before they existed and make sure that problems did not happen, or make sure that the identified opportunities did happen. So fast forward to creating my own consulting business, professional speaking business for the nonprofit sector. I apply that same experience in NASCAR racing, and for those that not familiar with that, it's all about winning. And so every single week after a race, the winning team will tear their car apart, nut by nut, bolt by bolt. Why would you do that? You just won the race. Cynthia, you want to find out why you won so you can replicate the same result the next week, right?
Yeah.
Well, then everyone else who finished second through last place goes through the same exercise. They tear their car down. They want to find out why they didn't win and make sure they don't make those mistakes again. So I apply somewhat of contrarian, got to challenge everything, take it apart. Why does it work? Can I help fix it? Excuse me. To the nonprofit sector. And so what I saw, and of course, over several decades of involvement with nonprofit groups across the country, I experienced and saw what you have articulated. There is such angst, such a high level of frustration that is connected to nonprofit board engagement. So I set out on a quest, very simply, that whole contrarian mindset. Why does it work the way this works? Aren't there any better answers? I wanted to find the answer to why don't board members do what they're supposed to do? So that led me on a quest to identify exactly why. I believe I've done that. And that initial research eventually was developed into Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game. And the book and the research I did was all from the board member perspective. So that's what's different about the book. And I look forward to sharing some of those nuggets.
Well, I have to tell you, here, I just need to edit that one typo there. That one of the interesting things is that the blaming is going in both directions, right? And leaders are frustrated. And you would think that at some point we get this part right. Nonprofits are not a new concept. Board membership is not a new concept. I'll tell you my theory. And I tell it to a lot of leaders. In all of my networks, in all of my dinner conversations with friends, and when I was a child, I have never, nor have I ever heard anyone say, when I grow up, I want to be a board member. And so when you don't have, right? And when you don't have a roadmap, so if I said I wanted to be a doctor, I have an idea of what that takes. Right? If I want to be a lawyer, I have an idea. But board membership, Hardy, my friends don't talk about becoming board members. So we're not exchanging information. And that's the first thing leaders need to realize, is that there's not a playbook necessarily, right? We didn't go to college to become board members. And so we walk into this role not knowing exactly what to do. And then we're expected to know what to do.
Well, let me, if I may, pick up on, I like your terminology, Cynthia, about a playbook. I'm going to, for conversation purposes, I'm going to take a different viewpoint. I'm going to say there is a playbook. The only thing is the plays are the wrong plays. And in the world of nonprofits, my experience with the sector is we tend to follow what we think are best practices. We went to a seminar, we went to a conference, we read somebody's book, we heard a speaker. And so we have these best practices, or we hear from our colleagues in the sector, our fellow executive directors and CEOs. So our practices around board relationships, board engagement, board recruiting are not getting the results that we would like to have. So we've all heard, that old saying about, what is it? What's it called when you keep doing the same things and expecting a different result?
Crazy.
We've all heard that, right? And so my suggestion is you've got to rethink. You've got to totally rethink your so-called best practices because they're not working. And there's some reasons that I've been able to identify with the benefit of board member insight, not staff, but board member insight. And part of those reasons have shown me what creates the disengagement. And at the top of the list, and that's what led ultimately to the Blame Game book title, was that while professional staff are pointing the finger and blaming board members for not being as engaged as they would like for them to be, the other side of that and the big reveal is that there's so many board members in the sector who are not happy with their board service experience, and they're blaming nonprofit staff because of that. So now, with the two fingers of blame pointing to each other, that is the nonprofit board blame game.
Yes, yes. And in your book, which I have to tell you, Hardy, so we met a couple of months ago, and you mentioned your book in as part of the conversation, and I looked it up and I thought, oh my, like every leader should read this book, and every board member.
Thank you.
And so I've been in that position where I've been on the board and did not enjoy my time there. And as a consultant, and being from the outside looking in, it's clear to me often, not all the time, but what's going on, right? And so when I ask leaders, do you meet with your board members one-on-one and get to know them as people? I have learned that there are EDs who have never met with their board members one-on-one. I worked with an ED who said the only board member he talks to is his board chair. And I thought, oh, wow. So partnering, right, to work toward the mission, executing the mission of a nonprofit organization is challenging to do if you don't know each other.
Absolutely right. And it's all about relationships and establishing good, solid, positive relationships. And every time I do either staff training or board development training or a combination of both groups together, and that can be interesting. But when I ask, what's the most important key to a good, successful, positive, long-term relationship, Cynthia, 100% of the time. And so by asking your audience here on Coffee Time with Masterminds, I'll ask your audience, what's the most important key to a successful, long-term, positive relationship?
Yeah.
And if I could see the responses, probably I'm going to say it's going to track 100% of the time with the responses I always get. And it's about communication.
Yes.
Right? It's about communication. And it's not more communication, another report, another email. It's about effective communication.
Yeah.
And so without getting into a whole communication dynamic seminar here, that's another talk for another visit for another time. But and what's the most important part of good communication? Listening,
Yes.
right? So here are a couple of quick tips for our nonprofit leader friends, CEOs and executive directors. The results from my research, board members have told me the number one reason good board members become disengaged is because of poor communication.
Yes.
So there's poor communication in the recruiting phase. There's poor communication or even no communication in the orientation, in the onboarding, the training phase. There's no communication, positive, good, productive communication in the board service phase of the relationship. I've had board members suggest, it's one of my favorite articles on my blog at hardysmith.com about, are you treating your board members like mushrooms? So keeping them in the dark, and you know
I love
what? And are you covered up with, well, you know what mushrooms are covered up with to
Yes.
grow houses to make. So do your board members feel like mushrooms? And a lot of times that's the case. So again, not more communication, but timeliness. Are they getting information prior to a board meeting so that they can digest it and be prepared to ask questions, engage in conversation? Do
Honey, I
they?
want to mention something there because one thing that's really interesting about your book is that you present information that are opposing tensions, right? So one of the things you mention is how we expect too much of board members, but we don't communicate enough. Well, those are two opposing tensions, right? So if you
Yes.
expect a lot, then you should communicate better. And I thought, wow, that's a paradox. That's not good. There's a lot of complexity there. You also mentioned how we expect our board members to read the material before a meeting, and we're sending the material complex. Let me see. Yes, you said complex information a day in advance, right? And so again, we didn't go to school to become board members. So I, for one, would need help reading a financial statement. So if you send it to me and I'm supposed to realize just by reading this that we have some financial vulnerability, I think that's a little unfair. And so I love that in your
Absolutely.
book.
Well, thank you so very much. And another couple of quick tips on being better at communicating is anticipate in advance, what do your board members need to know and what do they want to know? And then thirdly, how do they want to receive your information? So for our nonprofit professionals that are viewing the stream or listening in Australia, just close your eyes for a moment, visualize your boardroom, visualize all of those faces of board members around the board table. Okay. Well, while you're visualizing all those faces, Cynthia, think about this. Every single individual that you mentally have a picture of has an individual and unique communication preference that's unique to them. And by that, I mean how they choose to, how do they want to receive information? What communication channel do they want to receive whatever information you're going to share? And do they want a full report, or will a couple of just bullet points suffice, or somewhere in between? What about that personal meeting that you shared with earlier? What about a phone call prior to the meeting? Now, I know exactly what your nonprofit professionals who are watching or listening great are saying. Great, Hardy. We're already overworked and understaffed, and you've just added more to do on my to-do list. And my pushback there, if that's your thought, then I would ask you, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want a positive, productive relationship with your board members? And I would suggest that this advanced communication, extra attention, extra time, and I say invested in advanced communication with your board members, especially the ones that might tend to be a little more difficult in a board meeting, actually will pay off in the long run, because you will have improved relationships. And some of those that are less than positive, this will help you diffuse some of that. May not make them go away, but you can diffuse some of that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. You're making great points, and this idea of, and I was thinking as you were saying it, is it's like parenting, right? How do we know as parents to work together if we're not talking about how to care for the child, right? And so if you think of the child as the nonprofit, right, that partnership becomes really important and a huge investment in the long run. And
Absolutely.
what I would add to what you're saying in terms of EDs, and yes, I hear it all the time. Really, Cynthia, you don't think I have enough work? Is are you doing the right work?
Good
If
point.
you don't have time to build relationships with your board members, then you need to review what it is that you're doing, and perhaps you're doing things that you could move on to another staff person, because that is your role, and it pays off tenfold. It pays off tenfold. I do want to mention something that I think is being tested now in this virtual environment, but it's also been my experience that board members do not go into board membership wanting to feel isolated, wanting to feel like they're not important, right? And so it is important. This is why building relationships, we don't volunteer so we could feel more alone. We volunteer because for a lot of us, it is also, there's a strong social aspect to it, right? So if I'm volunteering and you're not reaching out to me and you're not asking me how I'm doing and you know nothing about me and I never see you except when I have to make a decision that's really important and no one, described it to me, it goes against why I'm there. And yet, Hardy,
Yes.
and here's my question. Many boards have moved to virtual meetings. And I'm meeting board members who've never met anyone on the board in person. How is that, in your opinion, in your experience, affecting how boards relate to one another, how board members relate to one another?
Cynthia, that is a terrific question, and I would answer that with another challenge question for our audience: is are you letting virtual online meetings be an excuse for not creating the type of engagement and connectivity that you want? We know
Yeah.
better than that. Now, in person is always better
Yeah.
than online. Absolutely, I think there's 100% agreement to that. But there
Yeah.
are times, because of scheduling, perhaps because of distance, board
Mhm.
members are from all over the country or all over the state or region, and online is really the preferred way. It's the best way to meet.
Mhm.
However, there are tools and processes for running a very engaging and very productive and positive board meeting. So
Mm.
how skilled is the organization? Is your board chair who's leading the meeting or staff who's leading the meeting? Are they skilled at online engagement building facilitation? So are you using the tools and the techniques? And you whether it's in person or whether it's online,
Right.
Cynthia, you have got to make meetings matter. So back to your
Oh,
point
I love
about
it.
why board members are joining, not only do they want that social aspect that we all are interested in, you know what else they're looking for? They're wanting to make an impact. They're wanting to make a difference. So if you're, and they're also very busy and they're time constricted, but for the moment, they've dedicated a certain block of time to your nonprofit, to your cause. Okay. So at the end of the meeting, was your meeting worth their time? Was the
Yep.
meeting full of reports after reports after reports? There's no time for questions. There's no time for engagement. There's no time for socialization. And you can do that online just as
You can.
well. Um, so you've got to make meetings matter. You've got to make meetings matter so that your board members who have busy schedules, they have lots of options for attending other activities and are you making your meetings a not to be missed meeting? So
Yes.
you take other meetings off their schedule. No, there's no question. I will be at this meeting. I would not miss it. That's critical to creating a good, positive board experience.
Yeah. I think I'm going to bring you back just to talk about meetings, because now you piqued my interest. But
Sure, we'd love to.
there is something I have to ask, because I run into this issue a lot working with leaders of nonprofit organizations. There are companies that require their staff to be on boards. And so those board members tend to do it because it's a requirement. I survey a lot of board members, and I love to talk on the phone with a board member, and he says, listen, it's part of my job. We work in the community bank, or we work in the community utility we work at a utility company, and I have to do this. And I just wonder, how can we turn that around? Because they also can be, and I don't want to point the finger at all of them, because there are some that, although it's part of their job, they love doing that part. But how can we turn that around in terms of engagement, so that they are not doing it as a job requirement, but they're inspired to do it?
Oh, I just love that. And that's one of my favorite parts in the book. So if I could walk this back just a little bit.
Yeah.
So one of the key reasons why, so our nonprofit professionals, I want you to put down whatever you're doing and pay 100% attention right now. If you don't get anything else, get this. One of the reasons your board members are not doing what they're supposed to do is you have the wrong people. And the reason you have the wrong people is you are not recruiting board members with purpose and process. You have to have intentionality. You can't settle for what I call slot fillers. Slot fillers can be great people, like you just suggested, Cynthia, but they are not the best fit as a board member for your particular organization. I don't care if they've been on a dozen, 24 other boards. That doesn't mean they're the best for your organization. So
I love that.
Organizations, nonprofits can get much better expectation results by recruiting board members with purpose and process.
I love this. And I quoted something in your book because I thought this was such a powerful quote, and I think every leader should have it on their wall. If you want to condemn an organization to failure, put the wrong people on the board. And I thought, that's it. That's it.
Boom. That's it. You're right. but we keep insisting on following recruitment practices that do not get the results that we want or need.
Yes.
So come on, nonprofits. We've got to change this, and you can.
And you give an example of an organization, one of the Boys and Girls Club, who did just that. And I love examples, because one of the things that I struggle with is, don't just tell me how to do it right. Show me someone who's doing it right? I need to see it in action. We have about a minute left. Do you have a turnaround success story?
Gosh, there's so many. I'll have to confess, I haven't thought about a particular one, but there's so many organizations that are out there that once they realize here's the need, and here's how we can make a difference. Just kind of a universal template, not a particular organization identified. There are plenty that are out there, and post-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, it's all about, can we survive? Can we remain relevant? Can we move forward? And the lessons in Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game say, yes, you can, and here's a way forward.
Yeah.
Create,
oh my God.
Create your board as a high value asset.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much more to talk about. I didn't even get to ask you about the different generations and their values and what that's looking like. And there's so much more. So we're definitely going to ask you to come back. Hardy, this has been amazing. And my hope is that our viewers and listeners take away as much and even more than I did when I looked at when I read your book. And so for those who are watching, Hardy Smith is the author of Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game. And trust me, you will walk away a better leader for your board if you read that book. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all next week.